Ben Shapiro, you're followed by millions of people online and on social media. You're one of the biggest names in American conservatism. What is it you think you're tapping into?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. One, there is actually a hunger for different ideas. The monolithic nature of the United States media is pretty evident in terms of its politics. People tend to agree on essentially the liberal point of view and increasingly a radical leftist point of view in the media. And obviously, I speak in response to that. At the same time, I try to provide an honest take on the issues of the day, and that means that I am not beholden to the Republican Party, for example. It means that I am going to speak out whenever I think that a principle is being violated, just no matter who is doing the violation.
You worked for the right-wing Breitbart website, but you left over its support for Donald Trump. And I think you said you'd never vote for Mr. Trump. Why is that?
Well, in 2016, the Breitbart made a hard turn in favor of one particular candidate, and that's their prerogative. Lots of publications have an editorial point of view, and Breitbart was one of those. The reason that I left Breitbart specifically was because of an incident in which a Breitbart reporter, a female reporter, was grabbed on the arm by Corey Lewandowski, then the campaign manager for President Trump, and was bruised on the arm, and then Corey Lewandowski proceeded to lie about it, and Breitbart proceeded to throw its own reporter under the bus, suggest that she was lying or making this up. And at that point, I determined that I could no longer work for a publication that wasn't even willing to stand up for its own reporters, and instead would throw those reporters under the bus in favor of a candidate that it sought to back.
Haven't you lost your battle for the Republican Party, though? Isn't the Republican Party now the party of Trump?
No, I mean, I think that the Republican Party is always the party of whomever is the president, technically speaking. But in terms of who are the sort of the thought leaders inside the conservative movement, who are the people who are driving a lot of the discussion inside the conservative movement, I don't think that's correct at all. I think that most Republicans see President Trump as a vehicle for their policy preferences, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with all of his personal foibles or the way that he behaves or the things that he says. And I think a lot of Republicans respond in anger to the media attacking President Trump, mainly out of a reactionary and half-appropriate upset that the media seem to have a double standard when it comes to covering certain politicians.
I'm interested that you think there's a thought movement inside the Republican Party. I mean, haven't the conservatives run out of ideas in America? All the new policies, the Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, they're all coming from the left, and they're popular.
Well, frankly, I'm confused by the idea that any of those are particularly new ideas. I mean, most of those ideas have been around since Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the very earliest, or at the very latest, rather. Some of them go all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. But the idea that new ideas are absent in the Republican Party is obviously untrue. We have a very strong debate that goes on inside sort of the conservative halls of intelligentsia about what is the appropriate action to take with regard to the medical system. Should global warming be considered a real threat, or should global warming be considered something that technology will solve? And if so, what are the best aspects of solving that? Now, there's a rich intellectual debate on the right about nationalism versus patriotism, for example, or populism versus free marketeerism. That debate is happening on the right to sort of suggest that the right in America is bereft of ideas, but the left is full of ideas. Number one, not all ideas are good ideas. I mean, AOC is pretty good evidence of that. I'm a big fan of some old ideas myself that I think are pretty good. But beyond that, I think that it is intellectual sneering of the highest order to suggest that only the left has new and decent ideas.
Some of the ideas that are popular in your side of politics would seem to take us back to the Dark Ages. Georgia, new abortion laws, which you are much in favor of, that a woman who miscarries could get 30 years. A Georgian woman who travels to another state for an abortion procedure could get 10 years. These are extreme hard policies.
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, I don't know whether are you an objective journalist or are you an opinion journalist?
I'm a journalist that asks questions.
Okay, so you're a supposedly objective journalist calling policies with which you disagree barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political aisle has ideas. So I just want to point out that I wish you would at least be honest in your own biases.
Mr. Shapiro, I know that broadcasting in America is now so polarized that on one program you only have the left and another one you just have the right. My job is to question those who have strong views and put an alternative to them. If you were an anti-abortion person, I would be putting pro-abortion questions to you, but you are
Really,
an
would you call
anti-abortion
the pro-choice
person.
position?
So why don't you
let me
just
ask you
answer
this.
my question?
Sir, I'm happy to answer your question. Please
you go
answer this
then.
one. Would you suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal?
I'm not taking a
Is it a
view on
brutal
this issue.
policy
I'm
to allow
asking
late-term
you the
abortion?
questions.
Sir, you just suggested the pro-life position is inherently brutal and terrible, so I'm asking you, as an objective journalist, would you ask the same question to a pro-choice advocate by calling their position brutal and horrible?
What I'm asking you is that why is it that a bill banning abortions after a woman has been pregnant for 6 weeks is not a return to the Dark Ages? What's your answer?
My answer is something called science. Human life exists at conception. It ought to be protected. Now, back to my question to you. You purport to be an objective journalist. BBC purports to be an objective down-the-middle network. It obviously is not. It never has been. And you, as a journalist, are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest?
Mr.
Seriously,
Shapiro,
it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. So let's move on. Would you vote
I
for
think
Mr.
it's pretty evident from your own questions exactly what you are, sir.
Trump? Would you vote for Mr. Trump in 2020?
I'd certainly consider voting for Mr. Trump in 2020, just like I'd consider voting for anybody else in 2020.